says presented to Dr. McGee as a slight token of affection and esteem by these survivors of the Titanic, April 15th, 1912.
Welcome to Watch Mojo UK, and today we're looking at Antiques Roadshow items that have taught us a thing or two about history.
He was obviously clearly a friend of the royal family, because here you've got this absolutely delightful sketch.
Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. Number 20. 18th century microscope.
When I saw this box coming down the queue, I was sitting down, but my knees started to shake.
It's rare to get a scientific artifact on Antiques Roadshow, but this strange wooden box was certainly a fascinating find for anybody interested in STEM.
And we have a wonderful mid to late 18th century microscope. What a beauty.
Expert Mark Hill reveals to the puzzled audience that what they're looking at is a microscope, but from all the way back in the 1700s.
So we call this, with this sort of vertical column here and this wonderful little curving bracket, a cuff type.
A cuff type.
And a cuff type was developed by John Cuff.
While it only ends up being worth about £1,200, and the owner is in no mind to sell it since it was left to her by her grandparents, it was a joy to learn about it. Many of the earliest modern microscopes aren't much older than this one, and it's from the dawn of microscopy as a viable area of science.
It really makes my heart skip a beat. Do you say the same?
I do say the same.
Number 19. FA Cup trophy.
It's a big trophy, but it's a very ornate trophy. Is that because it's a product of its time? Would that be to do with the designs in the late 19th century?
For over 80 years, this iconic object was the FA Cup trophy passed around to the competition's winners each year from 1911 all the way to 1992. While at the Royal Hall in Harrogate, sports legend Gabby Logan was the one trusted to accompany the FA Cup onto the program, presenting it to a crowd of spectators.
So, in comes this beauty in 1911. Although the marks are completely worn, we know it was made by Fattorini and Sons.
They were in for one of the biggest valuations in roadshow history, with Alistair Dickinson appraising it at over £1 million. Remarkably, Dickinson also says that this piece of history may have been bought off the shelf and wasn't commissioned specially for the FA. You can now go see the trophy at the National Football Museum.
I was just going to say, the hardest thing of all about this is trying to put a value on it. This is probably, along with maybe the Wimbledon trophy, the most famous cup in the country.
Number 18. Cottingley Fairies.
Now, I suppose a silly question that's been said many, many times is, do you believe in fairies?
In the 1920s, England was gripped by fairy mania when two young girls, Elsie Wright and Frances Griffiths, took some photographs of fairies around Cottingley Beck, now part of Bradford, to prove they existed. The pictures were taken in 1917, but rose to prominence when Arthur Conan Doyle, a longtime believer in all things supernatural, championed them as evidence a few years later.
So the story is that these two children, one age 16, one age 10, believed there were fairies in the bottom of their garden.
We now know that the fairies were simple cardboard cutouts, and the girls finally admitted it in the 80s, but some original prints once appeared on the roadshow. It turns out that the owner's mother was Frances Griffiths herself, and that was why she had them.
They came back with the camera and said, we can prove there are fairies. And these were accepted at the time, weren't they?
Number 17. The Artist's Halt in the Desert by Richard Dadd.
It's been in the family for quite a while. My grandfather gave it to my mother in 1930.
Sometimes a painting appears on the roadshow with an extraordinary history, like this one, which turned out to have been painted by 19th century artist Richard Dadd. It was miraculously a watercolor previously thought to be lost, turning up in 1987 and eventually finding its way into the collections of the British Museum.
It is an extraordinary painting. I don't know who this painting is by. I know it's a wonderful painting. I would hope that some indications, it would be too much to hope, really, that this was a lost painting by Richard Dowd.
But the deeper story behind it is somewhat disturbing. Dowd painted the Halt in the Desert while he was incarcerated in Bethlehem Hospital after attacking someone with a razor. He remained in Bethlehem for most of his life until eventually being moved to Broadmoor, where he died, encouraged to keep painting for therapeutic reasons.
Obviously, I've only had a few minutes to look at this, and it needs some investigation.
Number 16. Witch Bottle.
Now, you thought it might be port or wine. That would have been nice.
This infamous item, which you'll have probably seen clips of all over the internet, contained a centuries-old urine sample that one of the team unwittingly drank under the belief that it might have been some ancient port.
Well, you made me it tasted really rusty. Well, inside were these brass pins, all of these dating from the late 1840s.
But leaving the stomach-churning pee behind, the bottle is actually an interesting historical item, traditionally used to protect the owner against witchcraft.
In the liquid, urine,
yummy,
a tiny bit,
such good news.
A tiny bit of alcohol, and one human hair. And a mysterious little creature called an ostracod.
This one seems to be from the 1800s, owing to the shape of the bottle, but they'd been in use since at least the 17th century, according to historical records. As Fiona Bruce explains, they'd have been buried underneath a house's threshold to ward off magical malfeasance. Did they work? Why don't you bury one and let us know?
So, what this was not a bottle of port or wine, but a witch's bottle. So buried in the threshold of the house as a talisman against witchcraft.
Number 15, Ronnie Biggs' Monopoly board.
This has the appearance of a very tired Monopoly board. Why did you bring it?
It's a very important board because it forms part of history.
This specific set of Monopoly was used by the Great Train robbers while they were hiding out after the crime, using their robbery proceeds in lieu of real money and getting their grubby fingerprints all over it.
And this is the actual Monopoly board from the Great Train robbery.
Is that why there's one £5 note and so little of the rest of the set?
It was brought onto the roadshow by a representative of the Thames Valley Police Museum to teach viewers about this intriguing bit of true crime.
I understand that somebody was paid a great deal of money to rid the farmhouse of evidence, and the man took the money, but he didn't get rid of the evidence.
The Monopoly board was vital evidence in the case because they forgot to wipe the fingerprints from it. There were also fingerprints on the fake money that remained with the set, and also on display at the museum is some genuine cash stolen from the Royal Mail train.
On this particular one here, we've got fingerprints from one of the train robbers.
Number 14, Henry Moore sketch.
And these are all written, Dearest Evelyn, I can't help just reading a few comments here, seem to be incredibly intimate and very, very important.
More art, this woman brought in a collection of intimate letters that had been written by none other than Henry Moore, one of the 20th century's most celebrated sculptors. We're not sure how Moore's correspondent, the current owner's mother, would have felt about having these letters made public on the BBC, but it was certainly a treasure trove for art historians.
However, I think the one that I think is most extraordinary is this letter here, which is Dearest Evelyn, and then with this wonderful, absolutely incredible doodle, which is so like Moore.
Even though Moore probably didn't think too much about the drawings he was sending to people, for us now, it's wonderful to see these more casual creations. But the owner has a sad story to share. A large painting or drawing by Moore was destroyed by a flood years ago, and they only got £500 in compensation.
But I mean, this is incredible. You've got a collection here of what, 30 odd love letters?
31, yeah.
Well, number 13, The Angel of the North.
That is an original, but that existed before the real thing.
When it was first erected in the 1990s, this sculpture was certainly controversial, looking as it does like an enormous rusty plane stuck into the ground. But the years have been kind to the public perception of the Angel of the North, made by artist Antony Gormley, and in 2008, a maquette of it, that's a smaller draft of a proposed sculpture, appeared on Antiques Roadshow.
I think ever since we've the whole world has warmed towards the Angel of the North.
It actually wasn't for sale, owned by the local council, but it was valued at £1 million at the time. Other maquettes have been sold for far more, but this one remains on public display at Gateshead Civic Centre to this day.
I think it's worth asking, why is it such a successful work of art? And I think the angel, or the concept of the angel, goes deep into the human psyche.
Number 12, Churchill memorabilia.
So we took out some of the stuff, and you said, I've got this hat, and I've got this and this.
A local rubbish dump worker rescued this box of Winston Churchill memorabilia that somebody, somehow, threw away. This included one of his top hats, a cigar, a signed photo, and various letters written by one of Churchill's cooks to his son about her time working for him.
The mother used to work for Winston Churchill. She was a cook, and the husband was a butler for Winston Churchill as well.
All of these things were given to the family as gifts by Churchill, which makes it even more shocking that it ended up in a tip somewhere. Expert Mark Smith was just as amazed at these items, with the letters proving their provenance, which ended up being worth thousands of pounds. It's heartbreaking to contemplate the family losing this piece of history. Hopefully, they were watching.
We think that your box is worth £10,000.
Oh my gosh.
Number 11, Victoria Cross.
This is a unique moment on the Antiques Roadshow. In all the years I've been on the Roadshow, we have never had a Victoria Cross.
Would you believe that it's actually extremely rare for a Victoria Cross to turn up on Antiques Roadshow? This particular medal was given to the grandfather of the woman who brought it onto the show, though it's her husband who tells the story. He was awarded it for courage during the Battle of Passchendaele in 1917.
Sergeant James Ockenden was acting Company Sergeant Major. Noticing the right platoon held up by an enemy machine gun which was causing many casualties, he, with absolute disregard for his personal safety, immediately rushed the gun.
As Mark Smith points out, each time a Victoria Cross appears on the program, Queen Victoria intended that the medal wouldn't be coveted for its material value. However, these medals today will easily fetch £250,000 at auction, but we can't imagine that many families are willing to sell them, nor should they.
Queen Victoria said, "It's not about the medal, it's about the deed behind the medal. That's the important thing."
Number 10, Easter Rising medals.
They belong to my grandmother's aunt and uncle. There were 3 siblings who participated in the Easter Rising and then in the Irish War of Independence.
More medals for Mark Smith. This week, the roadshow was across the Irish Sea at the Ulster Folk Museum in North Ireland. As you'd expect, Irish history came up a few times, including these medals awarded to Irish Republicans who fought in the Easter Rising against the British in 1916.
So these are really big parts of the Rising. Yeah. This is the main centre part of the action, really.
As the owner explains, his family took part in the Rising and were even connected to the Republicans' base of operations, the General Post Office in Dublin.
The medals themselves came out in 1941.
Yeah.
But we have this armband as well, so tell me what the armband was.
The armband would have been given to participants of the Easter Rising prior to the issuing of the medals.
The Rising's leaders were executed and many more fighters were imprisoned at the internment camps across Britain. Today, the Rising is remembered throughout Ireland as a key part of the fight for independence from the UK.
I think they would be worth £20,000.
Jeepers.
Number 9, SOE Spy Radio.
But that's not what's inside it, is it? No. So what is inside it is a radio set.
This week, Mark Smith was tasked with unraveling the mysteries of this unusual box, with the owners totally unaware of what it even was. Mark identifies very rapidly that it was once a toolbox, but it contained a covert SOE radio. SOE, or the Special Operations Executive, was the body responsible for espionage in occupied Europe on behalf of Britain during World War II, sending invaluable intelligence to the Allies.
It's actually quite a complicated piece of equipment, in as much as that it can be powered by any source of power that you can think of.
SOE also conducted sabotage operations in Europe, although its wartime activities have come under criticism by modern historians. We don't know exactly who used the radio or what operations it might have been involved in, but it's certainly a key piece of spy history.
And it's worth somewhere between £10,000 and £15,000. That's not a bad toolbox to find in the shed, is it? No.
Number 8. Titanic Teddy.
So Edward, basically, made by Steiff, German company, was issued in 1912 for a very particular event.
The owners had no idea that Edward the teddy bear was so valuable, but expert Mark Allam knew what it was immediately. The Steiff bear is a mourning bear that was in the family for years and was expensive even at the time. The little scarf isn't original, but he's in surprisingly good nick despite a few holes, especially to say that he's over 100 years old.
So obviously the family weren't on the Titanic, but Edward himself was part of what I would call a kind of strict convention of mourning, and he would have been treated with reverence and respect.
Even with the moth damage, the loss of the Steiff button, and the unusual eyes, Mark announces that the bear is worth no small amount of money. The bears were intended to offer comfort to bereaved and suffering families in the aftermath of the Titanic sinking.
I think, being honest with you at the moment, I think he's worth £10,000 to £15,000 at auction.
Oh my word.
Number 7. Notes on Shakespeare.
Sometimes the best things come in small packages. My goodness, is this a good thing?
Unlike other popular writers who only achieve fame and renown posthumously, Shakespeare was always massively popular, with his plays pulling in enormous crowds in Elizabethan England. This notebook was written by one of his most dedicated fans in the 17th century and is full of detailed scribblings about the performances on at the time.
I suspect that this probably came down through the family from him, but I don't know. It just appeared from with my mother's belongings.
Plays would frequently change, either because parts were rewritten or because they had to, because of the constraints of different venues, so a notebook like this chronicles some of those changes between different versions of particular performances. It ended up being worth 30 grand.
Flicking through this is a 17th century hand. This is somebody making notes in the same century as Shakespeare. Anything really from the same century as him, about him, is of huge interest.
Number 6. Captain Scott's autograph.
And I have to say, this made me gasp, actually.
There were all kinds of things in this early 20th century autograph book, which once belonged to a woman named Dorothy Wordsworth. But one set of autographs stuck out more than the others. A piece of paper from the Seamen's Institute bearing the signatures of the crew of the Terra Nova expedition, including Robert Falcon Scott himself.
They just didn't make it. He went with his friends to the pole and only got 3/4 of the way back and perished there.
Along with Scott were Edgar Evans, Edward Wilson, and Bertie Bowers, whom history buffs in the audience will recognize as 4 of the 5 men who perished on the doomed march to the South Pole. Captain Oates is the only man from the Polar Party whose signature isn't here.
I think that this is worth somewhere in the region of £2,500 to £3,000.
Really?
How about that?
Very good, very good.
Thank
it
you.
won't leave us, of course.
Number 5. Florence Nightingale's toolkit. This unusual assortment of objects had come through this woman's family from nursing pioneer Florence Nightingale herself, who reformed sanitation and hospitals throughout the 19th century.
It's not a professional one. I'd have said it's a sort of good amateur.
All of the tools are, surprisingly, for carpentry. Appraiser Hilary Kay believes the provenance of the items, but advises the owner that she needs to find a paper trail that truly does connect her to Nightingale.
This lovely nut. And there you have your gouge, ready to attack.
She does have a photograph of her grandfather with Nightingale, proving that they certainly know each other, but Hilary thinks more is needed. After all, the tools are only worth £200, but they're extremely interesting.
It would be a major find, if you can find that bit of paper. So I would encourage you to go through the family records.
Number 4. Columns from HMS Victory.
Well, these are from the Victory, from HMS Victory. Really? And I actually got them from an old friend of mine.
These enormous lumps of wood were certainly one of the larger and odder items in roadshow history, brought on after they were rescued from Victory during one of its refits.
Let's come back to reality. You bought these 25 years ago. Were you going to do anything with them?
Originally, I was hoping to make something out of very special wood.
Today, Victory is permanently docked in the historic dockyard in Portsmouth, but we wouldn't even have it as a museum ship today if not for King Edward VII stopping the Navy from scrapping her in the early 20th century because of her historical significance.
If you can get paperwork from the Victory, from maritime historians saying, yes, we can guarantee these were in the ship and came out in 1930, you have then got something hugely valuable.
But these particular columns are believed to have been aboard Victory during the Battle of Trafalgar, seeing one of the most celebrated victories in the history of the Royal Navy. Nelson himself probably walked past them countless times.
£5,000–10,000 per pillar, because you'll never get another one.
Number 3. Royal letters.
It's a wonderful picture of life in Victorian England, isn't it? With these wonderfully grand invitations.
It's not easy to get a signature from a member of the royal family, because in general they don't sign autographs. But there are exceptions to every rule. The owner of these items got them via an ancestor who knew the chief librarian of Windsor Castle, a Mr. Woodward, who received and sent a lot of royal correspondence in that role during the 1800s.
It says, "Dear Mr. Woodward, send over those drawings," and then it's rather difficult to read which drawings, which is rather maddening, isn't it?
The letters give a window into what life was like day to day for the royals when they were in residence at Windsor Castle, including some hastily written notes from Queen Victoria dated to the 1860s.
Once again, there's another of the great Victorian figures, Darwin. Fantastic. And, as I say, it would take weeks to go through them all.
Other historical figures who appeared in the archive were the Duke of Wellington, John Ruskin, and Florence Nightingale again.
I can imagine, with a bit of research, it would be worth somewhere between £5,000 and £10,000.
Number 2. Survivors' medals.
Your medallion is the 10th anniversary medal for the liberation of concentration camps. And they were given to people, Belgians, who had been in concentration camps.
In tricky scenes, Mark Smith was tasked with examining a very rare medal. The medallion, which came from Brussels, was given to the survivors of concentration camps, something the owners seemed to be completely oblivious to, despite the very clear image of a prisoner on one side.
This bit in the middle is a triangle with a B. And that is the badge that was sewn on the concentration camp uniform.
Wow.
Mark made the rare decision of foregoing the valuation since the Roadshow has a long-standing rule about not placing monetary figures on Holocaust artifacts. As always, it's immensely important not to forget what people were subjected to during fascism's reign of terror in Europe, and it's an invaluable clip elucidating the history of an extremely rare item.
Now, we always give you a valuation on the Antiques Roadshow, but we don't give valuations for Holocaust things because there is no price you can put on what someone went through to be awarded that medal.
Number 1. Medals of a Titanic hero.
It says, presented to Dr. McGee as a slight token of affection and esteem by these survivors of the Titanic.
This couple brought on an extraordinary item that had belonged to her father, primarily to get a valuation so that it could be properly insured. The father, Dr. Edward McGee, had been the ship's chief surgeon on RMS Carpathia, the ocean liner that changed course to answer a distress call from Titanic when it was sinking. Carpathia rescued more than 700 survivors of Titanic and delivered them safely to New York.
That is made out of 14-karat gold.
Yes.
And there were only 14 of them made.
Oh, yes.
Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
For his part, McGee was given gifts by the survivors and this medal, of which there were very few in existence. This was in the 1990s, and at the time it was worth at least £30,000, but we can't imagine the family is likely ever going to give it up.
In New York, in 1997, one of these medals was sold for $50,000. So that equates roughly to £30,000 now.
George heavens.
Let us know in the comments what Antiques Roadshow list you want us to do next.